Okay, trying this a second time.
Take my gun. Negative, don't do it! Shoot out the window, you all die!
I would love a pistol that could just frickin' cause a nuclear explosion.
Product not yet rated. Product not yet rated. Product not yet rated.
Okay.
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 Product not yet rated.
Okay. Holy crap. Alright. Something needs to frickin' die there. Alright. Hello everyone, this is Pilocopter, and maybe other, also know my other name. That's like here at the moment. Alright, so yesterday I did a stream with Fulcrum where we went over a bunch of very important stuff. So important, in fact, that the screen was 1/4 size and no one could read it. So I'm going to be nice and redo the entire stream. Now, for those of you who couldn't understand what I was going through last time, I'm going to try a little bit slower this time. I admit I was a little buzzed when I did that, especially the first part of the lecture. Fortunately, the alcohol I drank kicked in a little bit later, and I was able to calm down, but the first part was completely lost. So I'm going to try again. Many people, like trigger editors especially, I know the general population branch, there's a whole bunch of terrain editors. There's a pretty high amount of trigger editors and almost no data editors. And to be honest, pretty much as many modelers as data editors at this point. Considering how many people have quit. Excuse me, I have some digestive problems at the moment. And people who would like to know the data, understand the trigger editor, can't seem to wrap their head around the data editor. They're able to figure stuff out, but the structure behind it is confusing. Now, I'm going to say something that is going to confuse you even more. There's actually the trigger editor that's the oddball out. That one is a hybrid of multiple messes. The data editor is the one that has a logical structure, but only if you understand something called object-oriented programming. This is something that is in modern programming, and it's not going away. You're going to see more and more of it. It allows greater flexibility. Excuse me. And a couple of other things that are required to understand the data editor. Now, I've said before that using this thing pretty much requires a college-level CS student, and that is to a large degree true. Now, I already have part of this pre-made from the last lecture, so I'm just going to go through it. In the data editor, we have some tabs: units, actors, models, and there's a whole slew of other ones that are laggy and hard to get at. And just in general, some of these are very, very confusing, usable only in certain situations. And some of them are only usable by Blizzard developers because they need a special unlock, which they will not give us. So, and of course, none of this is documented at all, which is the best part. So it's not surprising that many people kind of give up when they get to this point. But this happens to be the core meat and potatoes, if you will, of the game. So what we're going to do here is we're going to save a little bit of a tutorial map so people can actually look at it. That works. Now, as I said before, it's actually trigger editors that are the oddball. The trigger editor that's the oddball out. Now the structure may look more logical, but once you understand object-oriented programming, you'll understand why the data is the way it is. First, let me explain some stuff. A big question I've noticed is the difference between the models and the actors, and of course the Blizzard developers may have been a little slow on answering this one. So I'm going to try to give the answer as I understand it. Excuse me. Models is referencing assets in StarCraft 2, but you have a problem where there's the game engine and then there's the graphics engine. Graphics engines are very complex pieces of software, and Blizzard made their own. I'm not quite sure about it. It's okay. It could be better, and in some areas it can seriously ruin your day, but it's fully understandable. You have to remember, like people are saying they should double the map size. That's not doubling. Remember, it's 512 in one direction and 512 in the other direction. That translates to an exponential increase in how many little squares their graphics engine and game engine and pathing engine have to iterate through, go through to calculate a single thing for a single unit, or even just a single mesh, or even a single pixel. So to do all that has a tremendous performance increase. I can understand why they're not doing it. The fact they can even handle what it is, I think what it can is amazing in itself. But there are some other areas that they refuse to do anything about, which, now I understand it better, has pretty much been completely pathetic. I have actually become honestly, and justifiably with some knowledge now, disgusted at why they're not doing things about some things. So I might hit upon them here and there, etc., but for the most part, let's go into object-oriented programming. But first let me say that actors are the game engine's hook into the graphics engine. This is the game engine telling the graphics engine what to render. In this case, it passes in the model. I'll show you that in a little bit. Passes in the model, forces it to play certain animations, and a bunch of other stuff, including the health bars and everything else like that. The reason why actors have a bunch of random stuff in there that in Warcraft 3 doesn't make any sense to you is because that is all stuff that pertains to how the game engine interacts with the graphics engine. Other stuff is taken care of with no graphics involved at all, but the actor makes the game engine has a game engine telling the graphics engine what to do. And the graphics engine performs a task based upon information the game engine passes into it, which includes the model, orders, and everything else, including the animations. That's kind of the important thing. Now, many people ask themselves, why in Warcraft 3 didn't they do this? Why in Warcraft 3 didn't they have to do this? The answer is they did. Excuse me. Maybe not in such an explicitly defined manner as a separate actors tab, but they did. This leads us to the differing, first of all, object-oriented programming and the differing internal structures of Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. First, the one that makes a bit more sense of Warcraft to the user, at least, is the Warcraft 3 one. Warcraft 3 didn't have nearly as many data types. One of the biggest ones was this unit. Okay. Now, a unit like in StarCraft 2 can be a lot of different things. But the unit class itself had stuff for instance, sorry, no, not public. It is not visible from the outside. Private model. Private actor. These are the concept of an object is more like actually thinking about a person. It is able to remember things, it is able to perform actions, and you can create it. That's how we tend to think of it in the computer world, and it's an easier way to understand it. It's not the same thing as just remembering numbers and storing data. This is a more complex, it's built upon that same concept. This is a more complex interaction system that gives programmers a lot more flexibility. And if you're thinking you're getting away from it, oh no. Any editor comes out after this, and almost any new language, it's object. It is object. So you're not getting away from it. Well, it's going to write stuff in assembly, but there's no way any person who's coding the StarCraft 2 editor or even a Half-Life 2 engine is going to bother with assembly. You only do that if you're making everything from scratch. Okay. So, all this stuff in Warcraft 3 was contained inside the core unit class. Then you have your field inputs. Well, first of all, let's put the constructor in there. Okay, so you're telling the engine, now this is called from somewhere else in the game engine to instantiate this unit whenever you call for it. And because it's set in data, you have another thing like public void set model and model. Here's something like this dot model equals model. Okay, so now you're setting the internal model into, let me just import this real quick. So now you're setting the internal model in the actor unit, in the actor class, to this model object. Remember, the model is also an object. In the StarCraft 2 data editor, which is pretty much expanded or more easily accessible version of the internals of it, what is a model? Okay, well, let's just go look at one. The humble old SCV. What is that model? Well, obviously, first and foremost, it is an art asset. That is reference to a file that has to import and do things with. And look at all this other stuff. Every single one of these, most of them are methods that set values inside the model class. Well, Java calls them classes, but pretty much the model object has all these values that you can set. Now, there are default values, which are the defaults you see there, and then there's inheritance from those, which I'll go into in a bit later. But pretty much, in Warcraft 3, the model, the actor, and most everything else, and besides the abilities, were contained and referenced from the unit class. In StarCraft 2, they can be referenced from pretty much anywhere there's a field for it. They're independent and spread out. Now, this offers greater flexibility, but it also means that you're staring at a big jumble of data that doesn't make any sense unless you understand the concept of how objects interact with each other. Now, in this case, the actor does instantiate a model inside the actor because the actor has a model reference in here. As I find it, there you go. So it's referencing that SCV model in here. So when the actor is when the actor is created, it's also going to create the SCV instance of the SCV object. So, or maybe pre-create. I'm not sure how it works, but it's going to use that SCV model object, pull data from that, and then pass it in to the graphics engine. So this is kind of a graphics controller in a way. This is how game events, unit interaction, stuff like this. You're having all this being passed into the graphics engine with this actor. In fact, I think that tab should be renamed Graphics Controller. It would probably make a lot more sense. But rather than actor, call this in your own head. Call this the Graphics Controller. That will make a lot more sense to you. There you go, another improvement. So pretty much, model has a file reference. So file, model, file. So in the model file, you have this private file reference, and then later on, again, like the same thing in the unit, you set these models, you set these actors, stuff like that. Once again, whereas Warcraft 3 had a contained system, StarCraft 2 has it all accessible and spread out. Warcraft 3, you pretty much did not get any real access or control to that graphics controller. That's the key difference. Well, that's one of the key differences. You didn't get any real access to that graphics controller. You didn't have access to a lot of stuff because it was all contained, and to a degree automatically taken care of for you, but it was all contained inside the unit, or maybe the ability or something else like that. But most of it that runs pretty much, at its core, pretty much acts the same way in Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, but in Warcraft 3 it was contained and not visible. You had limited options in that case because you couldn't force units. I think you could force units to run different animations, but there's a lot of things you couldn't do, like model attachments. That was pretty much outside the realm of Warcraft 3. The reason being is because you did not have access or control of the graphics engine. The actor gives you that access and control. At a cost, it's a little bit more painful to learn. So if you're going from Warcraft 3 to StarCraft 2, this is the big difference. Once you realize that the stuff was in there to begin with, you just have it more spread out, and it's all there to be controlled. It's a little bit different story. you ought to be able to get a better idea now. At the same time, what instantiates these objects in StarCraft 2? Well, that is a bit different. I know in Warcraft 3 it was easy. You instantiate a unit, everything is instantiated inside that unit automatically. In StarCraft 2, I think it's a bit more independent with objects having their own separate instantiation events. I'm not sure how they keep it synced up. It seems to work okay, though. It is prone to glitching, especially when you do things it was never designed for, or they never tested. But I think that's one of the core differences there. These objects here, sometimes like you can see the actor instantiates the model, but at the same time, things can be instantiated separately as well. So there's that to consider as well. But pretty much this is the core data structure that the data editors build around. This is actually normal coding architecture. It's object-oriented programming. The trigger editor is the one that's the oddball out. Okay? Pretty much. It's reminiscent of functional programming, which is kind of older, but doesn't have to deal with object structures. These events pretty much call a constructor, which is kind of like the trigger, and you have all this action definitions and the like you can go to, like action definition or condition definition. But what's going on is that they have a compiler, semi-compiler, that takes all your GUI stuff and turns it into raw script that the game then compiles internally into whatever code they use to run it from there. I'm not going to say machine code. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but probably something like Java's bitcode where it can then be interpreted. The end result is this one is actually taking what you write here and turning it into a regular script with certain formatting, and then they compile it and run it from there. But at the same time, there is no objects per se. I mean, the trigger is probably considered an object, but the events that call it are actually calling it outside. People think that triggers are self-instantiated. They are not. They're actually instantiated from some other core function. And that when it says an event, it does a bunch of try catches where it tries to run the trigger. If it can, it'll run. If not, oh well. So there's that to keep in mind. Part of the reason, I'll get to this in a minute. I'm going on a limb here, but actually I'll get to it right now. I'm going on a limb here with this, but follow me. Let's assume, actually trigger by this way. Let's assume that you got rid of this crap. And you put yourself with a while loop. In this case, you're saying while conditions is true, do actions. Let's call this the master game loop. Okay? This is where I really disagree with the way Blizzard designed it, where Warcraft 3 was actually superior. First and foremost, it seems almost everything is in the same master loop. This causes problems. First and foremost, that means the triggers can indeed lag the game if they take too long to execute. Remember, it's only doing one thing at a time. Now, there may be some multi-threading involved, but it doesn't look like the triggers are part of that. And so create thread threading and maybe multi-threading. I'm not too convinced of that, though. Because, like in Java, if you're going to create a thread, you have to do a try catch and everything else like that. I'm not sure that's really the case with actual triggering. And I've heard conflicting stories on this, but mostly seems to indicate that it's not true. You're not truly creating a separate thread and letting it run. But it's also been noticed that not only the game engine, which calculates unit movement, will do things like update build orders, update build status, like the SCV just spend a little more time building stuff like that, and it has a weight at the bottom to make it loop through again. It seems like the pathing engine was also slaved to this same core while loop. This is a problem because the weight on the while loop is what is controlled by the game. Is partially, I think, controlled by the game speed. I'm not sure it's the core weight. There's 0.0625, which I think is an extra core weight, but your game speed controls how fast it's supposed to loop through all this. Okay. Well, that brings a problem with high unit loads. Their pathing engine is a lot more complex than it used to be, but it's still locked to the same core game loop, and that means that if the pathing engine is overloaded, the entire game is overloaded. You may recall if you made maps or played Warcraft 3, oftentimes in like Castle Fight or whatnot, you would see these giant conga lines, but the game wouldn't crash. The reason is because their pathing engine was on a separate loop. Now, it takes time to execute triggers, and you know, the more you load it up, it has to go through every single unit and calculate the next location, calculate the pathing, and all that stuff. Theirs would go through on their pathing engine on a different loop. So the more you loaded it up, yes, it would slow down, but the game engine was separate from that. The graphics engine mostly too. So the end result is you were able to maintain high unit loads that would not crash the game, whereas in StarCraft 2, because in addition it's causing high loads on the master game loop, it can crash the game. So that's something to keep in mind there. That's pretty much a core issue right there. So one of the things you can do to help, I'm not fully sure just how much it would help, is to lower the game speed and hide it so little stupid 13-year-olds don't figure it out. It really depends where that extra weight is located and whether or not it's actually going to make too big a difference. Now, to be frank, we have noticed a difference without any gameplay cost whatsoever. So I'm pretty dang sure they can put their pathing engine on a different loop without actually having to cost the game any additional resources. Well, it will cost additional resources, but won't cause any gameplay disruption. Because we slowed it down, and there was people slowing it down, and there was no real issue. So if you're doing a tug-of-war, strategy map, or anything with running, say, over 100 units, you really should slow the game down and scale everything up to compensate so the person doesn't notice it. So you lighten the load on the master game loop. You give it more time to execute every loop. It's not that much time, and I don't think it adds up to a full second, but it can make a difference. So there's that there. That's also maybe part of why they're afraid to not only see. The other thing about increasing map size is now the pathing engine has to iterate through that many more squares. Remember, it's 512 times 512. That's not twice as large. That's 4 times as large because you put four of the old map size squares in there. And that means the pathing engine has to iterate through all those squares. That means when you are one end of the map and you click to move the other end of the map, you're probably going to have everyone lagging while it calculates its way through that. So there's a reason it's probably not going all that big. There are other things they can do to get around this issue that would do the job almost just as well. This is part of the reason I'm discussing it with them, but we'll go into that a bit later. So that's the core issue behind there. Now let's go into the part about creating units. First and foremost, we're going to do it all from scratch. Remember, I'm doing this from memory, but I'm going to explain the fields, but hopefully all the fields I explained the last time. As I said, the video was off and I was kind of mumbling half the time. Excuse me, half the time, so probably not the best explanations. I'm going to try to do better this time. Okay, looks like I'm still broadcasting. All right. Now, he didn't do any particular unit there. Oh, sorry, I don't have the list, so I'm going to try to do a guesswork here. Let me think about this a minute. Oh, that works. Okay. It's probably the next unit anyways. The Roman Legion. Not up there. We're going to add it. Now, once again, I prefer melee because I have less to look around. He wants interior. I'm going to make it neutral because when doing custom units, it's a difference. Object type, remember, there's multiple kinds of units. There are multiple kinds of units. This is a dot unit. There also could be a dot structure. So unit dot structure, all inherited from the core unit, but having extra attributes or attributes set differently inside the subunit class. So keep that in mind. What you're dealing with here is you're saying what inheritance does it have? Almost all of it's going to be identical because it's inheriting stuff from the core unit, but there'll be some stuff in there it's inheriting separately. As far as copy from, you're just copying the values from something else. Saying to the parent value pretty much means you're not copying. That's all it really says. Oh God, how did I make it freaking not move that shit up there? Think that, no, yeah. Like that. Okay. So we're going through. Oh, let me take a side trip real quick. Sorry, I know you're really waiting to know how to make the cool ass units, and you're trying to wait. This button up here, which was added by a certain Blizzard developer. Remember I was talking object-oriented programming? Well, these are all objects. It's kind of hard to see sometimes, but you notice there's a structure of how it's linked together. This is an attempt to visually represent object-oriented programming. I'm sorry, the objects' interaction, relation with each other, and it's just not what I would call. I don't see it being that useful, really. So definitely, this is kind of what it's really representing, is all these different objects. But for the most part, you can decide whether or not you want to use it. To be frank, if you know how to use a data editor, you don't waste time on this thing anyways because it's not really all that helpful. If you know where stuff goes right off the bat. So anyways, let's get out of that view, and now let's go back to our favorite Roman legion. Here we go. Now the first thing we need to do is add some abilities in here. Now, to save time, you can just highlight the fields on the right-hand side from a different unit and copy and paste them. But I promised you you'd be doing this from scratch, and you're doing it. Well, I'm doing it, I should say. So stop, move, and attack. All right. Those are the default stuff. We may add some stuff later. Here's the command card. Yes, Okay, how many command card did you actually add this time? No, it'll be a different story. Okay, now, this is calling an object known as a button. And it's an ability command. Remember, this is an ability structure here that's referencing to the ability, and it's also tying the button together. This stuff ultimately gets passed to the graphics engine, but not through the visible actor interface. Excuse me. Because this is actually UI stuff. So the ability here is attack, and there's one ability command. Now the ability itself is an object. Once again, abilities are also those same kind of objects. The attack command here is the actual command, is a method inside the ability forming to attack. These abilities can have multiple, these objects for abilities can have multiple methods. Once again, it's also referencing a button object, which has a visible render done internally. So next one we're going to do is we're going to, I believe this one should be, I'm not sure the favorite order of everyone here, but it's probably be a good bet. So once again, look at this. This object stop, which is kind of an ability, happens to have multiple methods you can call to do certain things. In this case, we want to call the normal stop. Okay, the next one we're going to do is do the normal move command. Once again, take a look at all that. This move command has 5 different methods that can do different things, but it's all inherited from the ability move. So keep that in mind. In this case, we just want the regular old move. Next one we're going to do is just hold position. There we go. And once again, this is under move, and it's hold position. It's another pretty much the same thing as under the move object. And the last one, I believe that the default is something that I apparently need to take twice to spell, and that one's patrol. Once you enter the move, and there's the patrol method called from the move object, which we call mobility. So there we go. These are completely out of order, but they should work now. Okay, we got that in there. We got the unit name, which was declared over there, but you can change it over here too. This one is the first nuke trap we're coming across. Not specifically a name so much as the text key. Okay. Now, what that is kind of saying is that at this folder so pretty much, okay, let's try this again. This folder contains this folder, which contains a file which has this text. That's kind of what it's saying in a way if you're a normal person. So you go to this folder, then to this folder, look at this file, and then this text. People will leave it as a certain file name and then override it multiple times, and it changes the armor name all throughout because it's referencing the same file. So there's a way to live longer, unless you want to do something uniformly, and that is name them Roman. Sure to use one name. Name it Roman Legion, and I guess Roman infantry armor. And if you want to do something particularly special, you can just force it to be a different color. I think Roman was red. So we're going to say, look at the color. It's part of the red. There's part of the Roman tech group because it's red. All right, there's this nice little preview thing saying, yes, it's Roman infantry armor in red. Okay, now that one should not screw up anymore. These AI evaluation things, well, the problem is, you look at this, it's mostly for other units in there. This is mostly stuff you won't be dealing with. AI override target priority, this one I think, see here's the thing. There are aspects in the game, actually affected me Elite for quite some time, and might still do, where you can actually force units to specifically target certain unit types, like Thors or Colossus, something like that, over other ones automatically. That was a huge issue in Wings of Liberty because it meant everything went straight to the Colossus, to the Thor, and everything else, making those units pretty much useless. I think they may have fixed it at one point, but in pretty much every situation, you don't want them to have different priorities. In certain cases that you might, but for almost any game design you're going to do, make sure it's all the same priority, so it leaves up to random chance and forces the player to micro effectively to get around it. Okay. Tactical AI, once again, you have to individually specify these. Now, add-on. This is like when things Orange Blue did, if I recall correctly. I really haven't played this one in a long time. Basically, if you want a unit to be attached to another unit, like Orange Blue has, where he has a bunch of Immortals attached to a Star Cruiser and lies like crazy, then you can use these offsets and select the unit this is added on to. This might be useful later on, especially when it comes to making chariots. Keep that in mind. Okay, there's behaviors. These are the behaviors that the unit starts with. Remember, behavior is its own object. The more you get in depth here, the more you'll learn about this. Build on as. This is basically a complicated way to build an Investigating Geyser, but I guess as something else. I'm not too sure. This one here definitely build on. You're forcing the structure to build on a certain thing. This makes for Investigating Geysers. Damage dealt, damage taken. This controls. This is part of what helps your unit gain Veteracy. So these values will help them gain Veteracy. I'm not sure if it's the built-on unit or it's a separate Veteracy value, but that's definitely one there. Then this declares, resource drops off. This behavior response, if the unit's attacked, what is it going to do? So for combat units, acquire is pretty good. If you have a worker, flee is probably a better bet. Okay. So attack speed multiplier on creep. Let's get to creep. Attack target priority. I think this one and that one are. This one's actually the real one. Once again, you want to make sure it's pretty even, so it so you don't have to deal with those game design issues that StarCraft 2 for quite some time. Death reveal duration. If you want when they die to reveal an area, you would have this. This is the raise to reveal, and this is the kind of kind of reveals. Pretty much those default values are great unless you want to do something different. Default acquire level, I think this has mostly to do with when the unit automatically attacks, how it's going to treat it. So an offensive unit probably gets attacked first. It just depends. You can play around with that. Energy gain on damage taken, energy leech damage taken, like this one. You know, these ones here are pretty much like anti-mage from Dota and Warcraft 3. This is the kind of stuff he uses. Kill experience. How much experience? Okay, this is the experience. How much experience did he get when he kills? That's the default unit experiencing, which is different from Venerency. So in this case, if you want to gain a certain amount of experience when the unit kills it, then you might want to do something like 5 or whatnot. You can control that more accurately later. Once again, kill resource. When it dies, when someone kills it, how many resources they get. Life gain from damage taken. Do they gain life when you attack it? Do you gain life when you attack other ones? You can control this in multiple spots. Then there's a revive cost. I haven't played around with that much. Mostly regard to heroes, but it is not something we're using for this map project. Then there's the leeched and stuff like that. Remember, leech is a little bit different from actual gain because it takes it away instead of just gaining you and he keeps it. Turrets. The mothership, for instance, rotates on a turret. This is not a weapon turret. This is a passive turret. It still, I think, has to have an actor to pass the turret onto the graphics engine, but this is the turret we have to reference it in the unit, so the unit knows it has a turret on, so the unit knows it's supposed to be spinning. Passively spinning without screwing everything up. Combat weapons, you know, once again, we're going to go into that more later, but it has both a turret and a weapon depending on what you need. The cost of the unit, I'm going to start out with that, I suppose. Cost category, you don't really need to touch this, but it's nice for your players if you do a high-polished job. Make sure you go to the right cost category. These power-up stuff, that's mostly for heroes. These editor prefixes and stuff like that, I think they finally fixed those, but for the most part, I don't have to worry about that. And here's the movement, acceleration. Obviously, the unit needs to accelerate, right? Since it's a normal unit, we're just going to do a nice 5-foot whatever thing. Acquire leash radius, acquire leash reset radius, acquire movement limit. This is kind of what the Protoss carrier does. I don't think Blizzard ever learned how to fix it, but I think they can fix it. And in fact, I think I called you fixing it. But anyways, they had some problems in Melee where they really couldn't do anything with the carrier because they didn't understand their own data editor. But this is part of what controls that. There's other parts in the weapons tab as well, but you can actually make the carrier interact more intelligently with you know, dealing with enemies and stuff like that. This leash is pretty much what controls the interceptor. So this is those controls right there. Ally push priority. This is another big one. This is what lets the Thor and other Ultralisk units move through the armies when they're not in combat. When they are in combat, you're out of luck. So that's pretty much that. Now collides, we pretty much want ground collide and maybe structure. There's a lot of other collides you can do. You can do some neat pathing stuff there, but it just depends. Increase speed, stuff like that. Deceleration, another big one. Otherwise, you may not be able to stop. Now the inner radius. This is the it's how close the unit can physically get to each other. It's defined as a sphere, or I think it's a cylinder, and you cannot physically get inside that cylinder. The game engine will not let you. So, in the case of for the case of like big strategy games, stuff like that, you don't want units to overlap. You actually don't. So in this case, what you want to do instead is force this one inner radius here to be something big. In this case, we're going to do 0.35 for now. We'll go into that why later. Then there's inner radius while dead. Do you want the unit to block pathing when it's dead? Almost every case, no. Lateral acceleration, can it move left to right? You don't want to set that right now because that means it can slide. Mover, ground, you know, there's multiple movers here, but that's pretty much it. Overlap index, I'm not sure what that really refers to, but I think leaving there is a good thing. These pathing footprints are actually for structures. The plane array is another important one. People forget to set this, but you want to set it to what plane it's supposed to be walking through. It's push priority. Okay, so basically what this says is here's a push priority here. I think there was one up here too. Where was it? Ally push priority. Okay, This ally push priority is a little bit different than what I said initially. If you have in triggers allied and allied push enabled, you have to manually set the allied push a little bit separately, then your allies can push through your units. Otherwise, you can block them. Usually this is a good idea. Sometimes it may not be, but this will help deal with trolls because the troll will not be able to block you from getting through him. So you want to set this actually pretty high. I'm going to set this to 20 so it can push through allied units. And it's not when they're not in combat. If they're in combat, a little bit of luck. So your own internal push priority, however, should be 5 or something like that. Unless you want units to be in the front, like for instance, let's say you have some melee units that you always want to be in front. You set their push priority a little bit higher, they will tend to make their way to the front of the pack automatically or before you, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Also, having a light charge ability can help because that will get around it. This is the radius. There's multiple of these here. Pretty much, I think these two can be the same. The radius may be, I don't think it's the ideal radius. It may be the radius it wants to go to. There's a couple different ones here, and I'm trying to remember. I have to go look at each of them individually. That's not the selection radius, though, but it's part of that there. And separation, okay, that one's a radius I think has to do with the unit when it's affected by abilities. I think that may be the case. It's an individual collision thing. This separation radius, you know how Milas kind of clump together and they'll automatically spread out? This is what that separation radius does. However, they will not walk that direction. They will slide that direction. So unless you want that, don't go there. Speed, once again, we're going to set this pretty high because we're going to be slowing the game down for this one. Usually around 1.5 is a roughly average, 1.2. Now, boosted cliff level and stuff like that, I'm not fully sure what it refers to, but the name is somewhat indicative. Cargo left filter is not sure. Cargo size, obviously this thing's going to have a cargo size. Death time, how long it takes to die. In most cases, you want this to be instantly, but if you're doing RPGs, it's maybe a good one to look at. This whole energy thing, once again, remember you have a maximum and a starting amount. That's a big mistake people make because they'll leave the starting amount like 1, whereas the maximum is a lot higher and they wonder why it still doesn't have any HP. Life armor here, this one probably needs something like 2 armor to start out with. We'll go into more detailed ones later. Now this life armor level, when you make an upgrade, doesn't matter what it is, please, for the love of God, make sure you also increase the level. Because you'll have to mouse over and realize, wait a minute, this guy is gaining armor. But it doesn't look like it initially because he's not being upgraded. So a very important thing here, please increase the life armor level so they can see it. Life maximum, I'm going to go with around 200 for this guy. There's life regeneration, stuff like that. There's also life starting amount, once again 200. Be sure to set them both. Mass, this has to do with things like Star Cruisers. Excuse me. And this has to do with things like Star Cruisers. Let's say you want things to behave in a certain physics environment, and you set very low acceleration, deceleration. That mass will come to play in the value with large ships and the like. For most of the maps, unless you're doing big boats or big ships, you're not going to be playing with this too much. The mop here, once again, don't have to worry about that. I think this is mostly for passive AI units. And there's some item stuff here. Remember, inherited from the main unit class, even though it doesn't really play much of a big role in this one. Race, repair time. Obviously, that's how long it takes to repair a structure, but you can also make a repair a unit. You can make an SCV repair, say, pull it's right there. If it's something besides 0, then it can usually be repaired. Then there's the revive time. How much score do you gain when it's killed? How much score do you gain when it's lost? Not sure you want to say that one. How much score do you gain when it's produced? Okay. So you can also make them multipliers instead. It's up to you, but please do that because that's one of those things that lets your players know that they actually did well and allows them to brag and troll others, which is something you actually want to encourage. Now, a sight bonus, I'm not quite yeah, never mind. This has to do with light and dark. I haven't played with this at all, but I think it's pretty indicative of what it really does. The sight radius, one of those big things here. You have to play around with that a little bit, but usually some good values to set. Once again, shield, the regeneration, all that stuff. Another one here is the supplies, obviously, but remember something. If you want to cause supplies, you have to go the negative value. So let's try a 5. All right. And then vision height. If you want this unit to see up several cliff levels, then you would do a vision height thing. This mostly applies to ground units like the Colossus. You want to be able to be visible higher. But in some cases, you really want to do this, and this is where you control that value. Okay, now vital bonus on dense terrain. I'm not sure. I think this is something that they meant to implement but never did. I have certainly never seen dense terrain in StarCraft 2. Okay, now how to put stuff in the tech tree. You have to add it with trigger, but to set the values, you kind of have to come down here. Of course, there's an alias here, so you pretty much set it to whatever. Not sure the Roman Legion. Yeah, you may end up setting your own alias. Definitely go into that later, but not right now. Anyways, then there's a glossary category. This is pretty much, once again, this is for that help menu at the top when you look at the units. Priorities, what it's strong against, what it's weak against. Tech alias, you know, what tech does it belong to. There's a producing units, so when you build it, there's unlocking units. This is what goes in the help menu. That's good stuff to know. UI description, one that people often forget to fill out. Once again, be careful of what file it's in. And let's just do something real basic here. Okay. Now, equipment array. These are things you want to look like weapons and armor and stuff like that, but you don't want to actually be equipped. Not very well known, the Protoss carrier actually does this because it has more effective, more actual weapon abilities or weapons added to it than meets the eye. They don't want the person to see that. So if you have like something with a lot of weapons on it, I may have plenty myself, but you want to make it so that the whole bottom bar there is not just cluttered with them. You can use this equipment rating where you can create a fake weapon and link it that gives the same information as the other ones but doesn't have the same colossal mess. Much cleaner. Remember, ease of use is the number one thing here. This is the fidget. Pretty much when it's doing certain things, this is a chance where you'll do certain things. That's like how the unit kind of swings back and forth to look around to see who's behind, what baneling's behind them this time or whatnot. Fog visibility. If you want the thing to be visible in fog, you can change that too. For the most part, you just want it hidden. Height. This is a offset from the terrain. If you go above the terrain, it can help a little bit. If you go below the terrain, be careful. That can cause a serious problem. There's the hotkeys and stuff like that. The kill display, life armor display flags, anything there. Mostly you don't have to mess with this unless you're doing RPGs. How big it is on the minimap, you probably want to change that a little bit because otherwise it's this big blob. Including height, don't have to worry about that too much. Then you know there's display flags. It's not don't display flags. Same thing on this, display flags. Alright, and for the most part, serious model data, tilted priority, this is the render priority, you don't have to worry about that too much. Attributes, we probably want something like that. Probably be a better bet. Make it armor, no. Yeah, armor would probably be a good bet. Okay, so this is one you might want to play around with here, but these are the attributes you can choose to put on there. There's a death reveal filter, so not too much there. These effects, I'm not sure what they do. These flags here, a lot of things can cause problems when you mess with these. They seem to be excuse me, backwards. Obviously the worker flag helps. Sorry, worker flag helps out. It's a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. A lot of it's actually called from triggers. But you can flag it to not do certain things like no death event, prevent it from being killed. Doesn't actually work, I found out. Once again, this is a lot of miscellaneous control stuff. Be careful on what you do. Built on optional. That means that you can choose to build on something, you can choose not to. Like you want to build a Vestivine Geyser on, or just a ramp or something like that, you can choose to do that instead. I'm not even sure half this stuff even works, but for the most part, now movable is one that can get people in trouble. Without this, you cannot move the unit, it will not move, so you need that one. Turnable, same thing. Story research is usually a pretty good idea. And in the case of workers, stuff like that, use town alert. That actually has to do with AI, but I'm sure it works. And there's a bunch of AI stuff here that You know, you can say it to be an AI caster and stuff like that. This is mostly things you want to play around with tug of wars or mass armies. We may try something in here, but I'm not even sure half the stuff even works. And there's something that can force a lot of other stuff in here. For the most part, or you want something to be permacloaked, we can do that. For the most part here, I don't think we have to worry about much of this. If we do, we'll get there. Okay, and loot, if you kill it, what does it drop? Once again, mostly for hero stuff, which is more complicated than regular mass army stuff. Subgroup priority. This is a nice one to have. What that means is, let's say you pretty much just hit F2 these days, and you have a big blob of units. You tend to want your casters towards the top, because when you start tabbing through there, and you have to go all the way to the back just to get the High Templar, which pisses me off to no end. You want to be able to have them at the top. I'm pretty sure this is the one that controls it. So definitely one you want to set here. I'm not sure if higher or lower is the right value. Leave it here for now, but something you want to pay attention to. All right, so that's the unit tab. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go to the models tab and add our nice brand new Roman Legion model. Once again, what core type is it? What's the parents? Remember inheritance. It's a unit this time. Although you can make a C model too. Usually it doesn't matter too much, but try to be clean about it. What race is it? Do you copy anything from it? These two guys here, usually want to leave them alone. I'm not even sure Blizzard knows if all of them even work, let alone how they work. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose our model. This is a slow way to do it, but the thing about it is if you copy data and if you copy and paste data or just rename something and do something differently, you run into the problem of having issues that you don't know are there or that can be inherited from other things. There are actually, I've had many subtle bugs that are not visible in these editors that have caused problems because I copied it from another unit. And they will inherit those flaws. Remember, it's actually objects. So if there was a bug in one of the objects, it's going to be copied to all the others. So it's a slow way to do it, but usually one of the better ways. What I wouldn't give for search filters. Now, let's see if this does any better. All right. Let's see here. Roman Legion is a melee. I think you is mostly going to go with Protoss for these guys. So let's see what we can find here. An Archon might do it. Oh yes, the fun part where some of these are hard to swarm assets and they don't tell you. Let's see what we got here. I think we're going to leave the dark stuff to the Greeks, so we got to do something else. Hybrid Protoss, no. What do we got here? I think there's quite the same thing. There's a Prison Zealot, Entry Stalker. Let's see what we got here. Don't want to use Sarah Tool. I haven't played with a Stone Zealot before. Let's see what that does. Alright. Let's see what this bastard does. Alright, now we'll venture into the cutscene editor, which did not maximize when I wanted to. Alright, so first and foremost, a little bit of annoyance. When you change animation, it applies partway through. I missed the old model viewer, to be frank, but this is what they did, and the vaunted Blizzard knows all and sees all. This is the stand. Let's see what we got here. Stand, what does that do? Absolutely nothing, because this is broken. Let's try this again. Oh, I guess this is where he's in stone form. Never mind. Let's see. What is this spell thing? I think it was. And what has he got here for the attack? Nope, won't do her. That doesn't look all that right. Alright, let's try something else here. Pretty sure he won't have what I need, but maybe. No, it gives me more to work with. Aha! Okay. Alright, so it looks like we want attacks. Actually, that one works. Okay, so attack 4. Oops. I think I'll probably do okay. So this guy should probably be a decent bet. Alright. Let's go back to the move on to data. He'll do just nicely. And for the most part, this is, again, variables and data in the model object, going back here again. For the most part, most of this can be ignored unless you're doing some special stuff. The reason I do this is multifold. One of the biggest ones is that I always ended up doing this anyway, so I decided to start there. But there are some catches and it can get you in trouble if you're not careful. Low model quality, that's usually if you have something special and you made them by scratch. For the most part, don't worry about it. Priority against here, don't have to worry about that. This radius is a little confusing. But this one here is an overall radius of the unit. We want to set this to 0.35. I am doing the scaling here because to do in the actors actually involves some funny stuff. Once again, I have to do scale minimum 2. Alright, this one will get people in trouble, the selection layer. I still can't think of a valid reason why. Pretty much, they decided that what decides, you know when you direct select over your base, it chooses, and regular melee chooses your army units first? This is what controls that. I don't recall if it's a high or low value that's doing it, but this one will get you in trouble, especially those noobs. Okay, so be careful about that one. Now, this selection offset, if you want the actual selection circle to be offset from the unit itself, this is where you set it, not in the actors, not in the units. Once again, not sure why. We don't want to offset it for now. The selection radius, this is the actual radius of what the, how the units can be selected. So when you select it, there's a little green circle that goes around it. This is where that's specified. Once again, not sure why in the world they do that, but they did it. Shadow radius. If you're on low graphics, this is it just basically renders a blob or a circle on the ground instead of doing ray tracing. This is so people with bad computers, like to a degree mine, don't fry their cards. All right, now as far as the squib type goes, this is, I think, controls roughly reflectivity. In this case, we probably want metal. Once again, there's a lot of different stuff you can do here, but for the most part, okay, tippability. let's say you want the battlecruiser to bank when it's turning. This is what controls that. So there's that there. Now variation count. If you want the unit you place down to have multiple, like a randomly chosen model from a set, and you can't really use Blizzard's built-in method, which you can't use. You have to use your own custom models. This is kind of where you do it. Once again, this might control where the game cuts off the model rendering, but that is a loose guess at best, and I have not played around with it. Once again, most of this you don't have to play around with. I don't think anyone in StarCraft's lifetime is ever going to get here in any serious detail. I'm not going to say on the top one has gotten here, but I've probably gone closer than some others. I have seen some people do some good work here, but for the most part, it's not documented at all, and you're not really going to get it. Okay, now to the Actors tab. Remember, this should be the graphics controller or the art controller. Instead of Actors, it's an art controller, a graphical controller. All right, for the unit. It's named wrong. It is an art controller or a graphical controller for the unit. This is what tells. This is how the game engine, when it has all these unit values, like when the unit is given the attack order, and unit gives you the attack order, this art controller tells the graphics engine to render that attack based upon the model it feeds in there. So that's what this really does. You didn't see it in Warcraft 3, or didn't see much of it at least, but it was there. Okay. Now, we're going to create our own model. Once again, parent. During game standards, usually a good bet. And not do that. I'm not sure if you need to do this, but don't leave yourself open to any potential bug things later on. Okay, now. Excuse me. Once again, I don't fully understand all this, but there are certain aspects you need to be careful of because they're noob traps. First one is this little token. Why the hell is it down there? It used to be up the top. Anyways, this is something they use to automatically set the value, set certain core values. It's handy, except it can get you in trouble. So, because oftentimes in the past it's bugged out. I think for Sol here it wasn't working at all, or more actually. And don't trust these auto setters here. Go through and check to make sure it's actually right. I haven't had a problem with it in a decently long time, but Blizzard, you patch something. Actually, not even Blizzard. You patch something, it breaks something else. That tends to be the way it goes. Okay. So it automatically sets some values, I guess, in here. First and foremost, let's see. We're just going to go down here. Proximity system. I'm not quite sure what that is, but best leave it enabled. Once again, these filters and flags, like suppress creation there, but some of these things, no one knows what they do. As far as fog visibility, remember this is the visibility of the model. It's controlled via a couple different places. This one I think is the one that really counts, though, where the art is rendered. Pretty much in this case, we want it to be hidden in fog. Look for second visibility test. The heck? Never mind. Portrait actor. All right. Hang on a minute. I'll get to that one. God damn it, the previous guide had the wrong thing. Anyways, portrait camera. These are for actor-controlled stuff. I think this is when you want more complicated things in the default unit. We're not worried about that right now. But if you want the unit in the bottom right to narrate a little bit, special stuff, you need to use the portrait actor, which has more complicated controlling. Proximity position. Pretty much center model bound is usually the best bet. Sometimes the actor may do better, though. It depends. Most of it is, most of it you don't need to worry about. It's the unit flags here. Wait, that's not the one. Animation birth duration. This will make it automatically play animations when it's created. And also blob shadow. That's for low resolution graphics. There's other stuff here too. it's kind of a bunch of different places at once, and I'm not sure all of it works, and I'm not sure which ones are better to use. In some cases, I have some experience here and there, but a lot of times you don't. Animation turn duration, not too sure about that. Now, baselines here, this is what it automatically, when you call a stand or a walk, this is the animation plays. In most cases, especially with StarCraft 2 units, you don't have to worry about this because they're preset to what StarCraft movie used. For using custom models, you may want to change these to make it play other animations by default. There's a bunch of animation stands and walk intro outro stuff like that. This is for smoothness. Walk animation move speed. If you're using custom models, you will be going back and forth with this a lot. This one here, once again. Animation blend time, once again. Don't have to worry about it for StarCraft 2 models. It can cause problems in some cases, more than it fixes, so you usually want to play with that. Once again, creep stuff, off-scale factors. Most of this I have never used. Minimap icon background. Now, I'm not sure this might be where you set the minimap icon. I remember it being named something else, but it may be there. And the icon is team colored. Ooh, that's nice. I'll definitely keep that in one of, oh my god, okay. This is definitely going to be handy. Alright, so yeah, custom minimap icons, you can team color if you have textures rendered in alpha channel. So that's a good thing to do, and the scale of it. Yeah, there's some really good stuff in here. For now, let's leave these alone. But we can definitely do some stuff here. And this is the tooltip, though? No, it's not the tooltip. That's when you mouse over, it's going to tell you what it is. That's definitely going to be handy later on. But we'll get there when we get there. Now, the art model, you notice I was warning you about this. It didn't actually set it. So here we go, all the way down. Now, I pressed the keys to get myself in somewhat the right region. Otherwise, you may want to slash your wrist on occasion. Now, for the most part, the build model is only really for structure, so if you want something special to happen, you don't have to worry about that. The placement model, once again, that's when like you select a unit to build, like the barracks model has a different model for the placement, which is kind of like that green glowing one. That's actually a separate model you're moving around, but it's for a unit, for the placement when you build it. Once again, though, don't really have to worry about this for the regular units. Portrait, though, a lot of people will complain about this if you don't do it. Now, they don't understand that it's kind of pointless anyways. Especially custom models, because porting is something I have not ever made work. But, the choice in the matter, we have to put a portrait in there. Other people will complain. Model flags, here's a big one. I don't know all of it, but there's one very important thing here. Excuse me. Allow hit test. This is going to come into play when you start dealing with model attachments because when the mouse on the screen, remember it's all 2D, it's really just a flat screen. When the mouse intersects with what the game engine thinks is your vision to a piece of geometry on the unit, it's called a hit test. That's what lets you select the unit or object or whatnot. And in some cases, though, you may not want it to do that. Like if you have a model with a bunch of attachments, sometimes it's better just to have a core model that's invisible, that they can intersect there instead of having to have the game engine calculate a whole bunch of stuff. Like for instance, Bounty Star Cruisers. Oh, not Bounty. Oh, fuck! I just insulted somebody. Orange Blue Star Cruisers. He potentially has that issue because the game engine is trying to calculate mouse intersection. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. And I'm sorry guys, my voice is beginning to go. Alright, so there's one there. Placement model, I think this one is, I think that's like a temporary model that stays there after you place the unit, but I may be wrong. Now, a lot of this stuff seems to overlap and gets more confusing. Some of these, though, are just regular direct modelings. Other ones are actor controlled. So if you want to do something special, you can place it. You probably want to do this one instead. It's rather confusing, though. And, okay, so another one here is art scale. Now, this gets kept 1:1:1 because we changed it in the model instead, but you can also change it here. I learned the hard way that I just want to go to the model and be done with it, but if you want to play around with this and do some fancy stuff, you can definitely do it here too. Now, there's another one here, Death Actor Model. This is an actor now. We don't want that. So we're going to go into, I think it's Death Effects. And watch it take a blooming hour to open. There we go. Okay, so there's a little problem here. I think this is the one. I believe it's this value you want to change. Actually, test it. And make a death model for Tassadar. Okay. We'll have to play this later, but there's when the unit actually dies, it plays a different model that can make the unit do something special, like fall on the ground and die or something like that. That is where you set that in here. I think that's where you set the default stuff, but I'm going to have to play around with that. I think I'm going to end up using a Zealot death model. Like, once again, it's scale. Remember, you got to scale it to use that when Tassadar dies. It should be pretty close, and I don't think people are going to notice it too much. Okay. Once again, overkill by damage. I think that pretty much has to deal with it, not let it go over 0 or something like that. I never once need to work with it. Okay. So now the rest of this you don't really have to worry about too much. Most of this, once again, is particularly special stuff. Macros can be nice, and but most of the stuff you will be playing around with. This is the big one now. As you see here, it doesn't think the room exists. Oops. That'd be why. But remember, little boys, be sure to hit that suggest button. Okay, that might make things a little bit easier. So it turned out I did set the values, but based upon name, not based upon, well, not really much they could base upon anyways. But that should take care of the bulk of the initial issues. This will make the unit put on the ground and move around. As you can see here, it's now working that way. Almost all this junk in here, or the vast majority of it, has to do with the Phoenix gravity, graviton ability, which they've had an enormous amount of trouble with. But for the most part, you don't have to worry about that. You can go and delete if you want to. Ones are nice to have, like for instance, ready start, attack stop, removing these animations. Remember, these are all manually controlled. Warcraft 3 did this for you, but you didn't have as many options, and you were kind of forced to use their stuff anyways. Now you have a bit more options, but it's also more complicated. Pretty much though, this is a bunch of events that make it so the attacks cleanly. It stops attack, that sort of stuff. Excuse me. Remember, these events will probably go into later detail depending on the project, but there's pretty much just the traditional stuff here. What I'm looking for right now is... Alright, I'm going to assume that this thing has a unit death event somewhere that I'm not reading because the freaking text is so small. But for the most part, you may these have to do with events and stuff like that. Once again, the game engine triggers these, and then all that stuff ends up being passed to the graphics engine. This is the events that actually control the rest of it. So when you tell the graphics engine, okay, now the unit's walking, okay, now the unit's dying, okay, now the unit's plastered over the far wall, plastered all over the far wall, this is the events that control that. Now, this attachment stuff like that, this is for actor attachments. Probably going to get at that later. Maybe, it depends. I wasn't intending to do anything complicated here, but this is what controls that. There's some physics stuff I don't really know anything about because I never even heard of it working. A lot of stuff, I'm not even sure how much all this works. Inherit properties, this one's a big one. For instance, if you want to inherit it from a parent actor, then you want some of this stuff. That has once again to do with model attachments. Then there's a bunch of stuff here. A lot of this seems to overlap, but this one here is a bit of a bigger deal once it opens. Lord knows why it needs to take that line too long to open, but it does. Now these are the regular sound references, and actually I'm not going to use Tassadar, I'm just going to use now here's the other thing, a lot of these don't actually pertain to StarCraft 2, they actually go back to Warcraft 4. I did just say that. Alright, help, you don't want that thing going off all the time. The what thing, obviously there's a what value here. There's a yes value. These are sound sets that I've heard. This is the sound that when it plays when it's attacked. This is the sound when it plays it's pissed. I think it happens when you click on it a whole bunch. This is the movement sound. Unless you want that thing to be going off whenever it's moving, and lots of it, leave that one alone. Once again, turning, don't need that. Board, when it boards a ship or something like that. We'll have to run later. Warcraft 3 has a sound for that. I'm not sure this one does. We'll get that one later. Construction, once again, there's a click one if you want to do some stuff, highlight the whole 9 yards. But a lot of these will make it go off like a Roman candle, and you don't want that. So, actually, this is one of the, yeah, it doesn't go. Okay, that should be somewhat okay. We'll have to see what happens from there. But that will make sure that make it so the unit actually has sound. Okay, this bar, the health bar and stuff like that, this is another big one. I was always too lazy to change it, but it will kind of annoy people. For the most part, this distance, I believe, is the distance from the camera. This height is the actual height of the bar. I believe you want to do something a little different with that. This offset, I think, is from the ground. I may be wrong. But I'm going to set that to 20. We'll play around with it later on. This is the bar width, how wide it is. Probably set that to like 35. Hope it won't get in the way. There's add-on indicator, stuff like that. It's for Terran barracks and stuff like that. Errors, group icon. I'm not fully sure why we need all this, but even if we do need all this. But I found it's usually a pretty good bet to better safe than sorry. This is one of those cases when this search bar is incredibly handy, but still incredibly laggy. So unit, Protoss. I'm not going to take forever to search for Tassadar stuff. Or maybe I am. There he is. No, wait. Ooh, don't want that. Too glowy. I don't understand why all these random texture stuff needs to be in here with what people are only finding for icons, but apparently they decided they need to have them that way. Alright, there we go. The Zealot. The icon variations, once again. Hero icon, if it's a hero, then go ahead. Life armor icon. It will not show unless you set it here in the actors. Once again, I have no flipping clue why it's over here. It would be so much more sense it's over in the Units tab along with the life armor stuff over there. And don't matter because the control will be upgraded anyways. But for the most part, we're dealing with the level 0, ground armor, level 0. Okay, brilliant. Info text, what is this thing? There's a lot of these things here, just for completeness sake, just set them all. And of course do some coloring if you want to, and some special styles if you want to waste all your time with that. I didn't set the value. Oh, the text key, that's right. Remember that whole folder thing? I got burned on that. I'm just going to leave it there. If it's not important to have a text key, I probably don't want it. Minimap flash from attack enabled. Minimap icon. This is the minimap icon for it. But you can make it team colored above. There's render priority, selection color, use self color, hard node. I'm not sure what that's about. Selectability. Okay, there's shield armor icon. You don't need status bar. What it shows and all that. Status colors. You make some fancy. Harvester data. Lord knows what all that does. Text in, not sure what that does. Unit border color, if you wanted to have a certain color when it's bordered, then you can do that. Actually, let's try that. Let's do a nice... let's do... okay, here we go. Unit icon, this is another big one here, and you notice how for some strange reason there's two different interfaces for this and you cannot copy and paste it, and you cannot copy and paste the file link, which also doesn't make any sense. Okay, Protoss, a lot. Okay. And variations again, kill rank, model frame actor, a lot of stuff you don't know. Vital colors, you want to change the colors of it. Vital name, not sure about that. Oh, the wireframe, this is that little green thing in the bottom center around here. Now this one goes back to the group icon thing. So now, little trick here. Yes, you can go find the green one. However, especially when you're mixing custom models, which we might do, another thing you can do is just just turn that one into the default unit icon, which I copied from the other one, and the game will automatically turn it green. There's a bunch of other stuff here like wireframe shield and all that. That's for more custom wireframes like ships and all that. For the most part, I really haven't played with it that much, and it's a painful to make, and I really haven't found all that rewarding. Okay, so we go back to the Units tab and press the handy-dandy Save button. What we should have is a unit that has the move abilities, the models, the actors, the sounds. This will be a full-blown thing. Let's go ahead and place that little bastard on the terrain once I refresh this list. Neutral, object type, unit, and wow, I still have to go on, but let's see the region. Voila! We have the Roman. Maybe on the bit on the small side, but it'll work. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to start this game up and see what it looks like in-game. How can you have a crash with the default trigger? Oh! Oops, wow, loop. Look, he's running around! Whee!
By your will, for Artanis, Ula Sadari.
Yay, he's running around! Yeah, his HP. Oh, look at that! Roman Legion down below. Okay, now I know how that goes. Look at that, the armor icon. His stats, his kills. His speed, his armor. I mean, it's all there. And you're not seeing icon render because I'm on low-res graphics, but his portrait will also render. I mean, look at all this. Okay.
By your will,
He patrols. Okay. So that will take care of that minor problem. So. And of course I can add to control groups too. Okay, never mind. Oh, yeah, we can do that. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of that minor detail. We now have a unit that can run around and just look like a giant target, really. I'm going to go ahead and edit out that one little phone call, rather awkward, and then I'm going to go ahead and try to put this video on the web. I apologize lots for the last time. I didn't realize that it was on the corner until afterwards. So that's why I'm doing the whole stream over again to help you guys out. So let's see if we can get some more diplomacy maps made. Fulgrim has been very good at, well, he actually came back and did the stream. We're going to be trying another one on Wednesday at the same time, 5 p.m. my time, which is Mountain Time, GMT -7. And we're going to be going over adding, at the very least, weapons to the units and maybe some abilities. So stay tuned, and let's see if we can get some viewers, because I like to know that people actually give a rat's. Anyways, take it easy.